Britain now has a new king, Charles III, following the death of his mother and longest-serving monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, on Thursday, September the 8th, after reigning for 70 years. On this episode of Special Report, we chronicle the life and times of the Queen and the responsibilities on the shoulders of her successor. Thanks for joining us on the program. I'm Jeffrey Uzongo.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
The United Kingdom's longest-serving monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, had a reign that spanned post-war austerity, the transition from empire to Commonwealth, the end of the Cold War, and the UK's entry and withdrawal from the European Union.
He sought to recreate the European family and provide it with a structure under which it can dwell in peace, in safety, and in freedom. As I look around me in this ever more important Parliament of Europe, I believe that members of the Parliament and all Europeans can be proud of what has been achieved. I am grateful to you, Mr. President, for your warm welcome. I thank your predecessors, Senor Enrique Baron and Lord Plum, for asking me to make this visit. I would like today to consider how the European family is growing and to look ahead to the challenges which face us. I welcome the opportunity to visit Strasbourg. This great city has long been a center of learning and culture, drawing its personality from two of our great European nations, while also suffering from the rivalries between them. After years of conflict, Strasbourg emerged as a triumphant symbol of the reconciliation between France and Germany, which the founding fathers of the community saw as the precondition for a wider European peace. The European family contains diverse personalities. In this and in its need for tolerance and mutual support, it is like any family. The founders of the European community wanted to draw strength from that diversity. They sought to manage and channel differences, to bind nations and peoples together in a common endeavor as free partners. They fully recognized the scale of the task, but their aims were much more ambitious than just a materialistic vision. For example, they fashioned the first community, the European coal and steel community, because they saw the coal and steel industries as the essential motor of war and peace, of national destruction or common prosperity.
Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and other territories and realms, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, was born in April 1926 in Mayfair, London, as the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York.
Princess Elizabeth makes her first official appearance in public at a wedding within the royal family, says one observer.
In 1953, she was crowned at Westminster Abbey in the first major televised international event.
Is Your Majesty willing to take the oath?
I am willing.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Union of South Africa, Pakistan, and Ceylon, and of your possession and the other territories to any of them belonging or pertaining, according to their respective laws and customs.
I solemnly promise so to do.
The promise is sealed at a faldstool before the altar. The Queen kisses the book and signs the form of oath. The Bible itself is then presented to her by the moderator of the Church of Scotland.
Here is wisdom, this is the royal law, these are the lively oracles of God.
The Queen's crimson robe is removed. A canopy of cloth of gold is brought forward by 4 Knights of the Garter as she takes her seat in King Edward's chair. When the congregation again see their Queen, the character of this consecration is symbolized by arraying her in vestments resembling those of a priest. The sword of state is brought from the altar to be delivered to the Queen. Presently she rises and carries it back to the altar in token of submission of her authority to God. The last and grandest symbol of all is the crown of St. Edward. It is blessed by the Archbishop at the altar. The climax of the ceremony has arrived, when the Archbishop gently sets this splendid emblem on the Queen's head. And the trumpets sound.
She reigned as a constitutional monarch through major political changes such as troubles in Northern Ireland, the decolonization of Africa, and the UK's entry and withdrawal from the European Union.
My government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October. My government intends to work towards a new partnership with the European Union based on free trade and friendly cooperation. My ministers will work to implement new regimes for fisheries, agriculture and trade, seizing the opportunities that arise from leaving the European Union. An immigration bill ending free movement will lay the foundation for a fair, modern and global immigration system. My government remains committed to ensuring that resident European citizens who have built their lives in and contributed so much to the United Kingdom have the right to remain. The bill will include measures that reinforce this commitment. Steps will be taken to provide certainty, stability, and new opportunities for the financial services and legal sectors. My government's new economic plan will be underpinned by a responsible fiscal strategy, investing in economic growth while maintaining the sustainability of the public finances. The integrity and prosperity of the Union that binds the 4 nations of the United Kingdom is of the utmost importance to my government. My ministers will bring forward measures to support citizens across all the nations of the United Kingdom. My government remains committed to working with all parties in Northern Ireland to support the return of devolved government and to address the legacy of the past. My government will take steps to protect the integrity of democracy and the electoral system in the United Kingdom. My government will continue to invest in our gallant armed forces. My ministers will honour the Armed Forces Covenant and the NATO commitment to spend at least 2% of national income on defence. As the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, my government will ensure that it continues to play a leading role in global affairs, defending its interests and promoting its values. My government will be at the forefront of efforts to solve the most complex international security issues. It will champion global free trade and work alongside international partners to solve the most pressing global challenges. It will prioritize tackling climate change and ensuring that all girls have access to 12 years of quality education. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, other measures will be laid before you. I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
Her reign spanned 15 prime ministers, from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss, the country's new prime minister. A few days before her death,
our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service.
she visited Nigeria twice between January and February of 1956.
Chief Adeniji Adele II, who has 5 wives and 25 children, is the first...
And in December of 2003 to attend the Commonwealth Head of Government's meeting after years of granting Nigeria independence in 1960. The lowest point of her reign was in 1992 when her first son, Prince Charles, separated from his wife Diana following a tell-all book. Her second son, Prince Andrew, also separated from his wife. And her only daughter, Princess Anne, divorced her husband, while Windsor Castle was seriously damaged by fire. And Diana's death in 1997. Things brightened again when our Golden Jubilee came along in 2002 and the United Kingdom once again showed their support for the monarchy. The monarch followed up with a role at the London Olympics, appearing alongside James Bond, played by actor Daniel Craig, at the opening ceremony.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
When the coronavirus struck in 2020, the Queen was forced into isolation, but she continued to carry out her engagements online. Not long in February this year, she tested positive for COVID-19. The Queen braved through the passing of her beloved husband, Prince Philip, and his funeral in April 2021. Fears of her health grew later as she spent a night in the hospital. The Queen's last appearance during the celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in June this year, she appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace for a few minutes and waved, much to the delight of the crowd. And after 70 years of service, Her Majesty, loved by Britons and around the world, passed away peacefully at her home in Balmoral Castle. Reigning for 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II is now being mourned by the world as tributes pour in from world leaders and dignitaries.
Her standing and influence on 2 occasions helped the Commonwealth to survive its existential crisis. She was very knowledgeable about major events in Commonwealth countries, and she maintained warm relationships with heads of governments in the Commonwealth. Whenever there was a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, she had audiences with all of them. And of course, as Secretary General, I was privileged to have regular audiences with her. And I found her an immensely committed and knowledgeable person. And she also had a very human touch as a side of her that is not always evident from her official persona. And I'll tell you one story. Every year, the Secretary General and his wife hosts a reception on Commonwealth Day at which Her Majesty was the principal guest. In one of such receptions that my wife and I hosted, I think it was in 1999, our youngest child, our son, I presented him to the Queen, and the Queen asked him what he did, and Emenike, my son, said, "Your Majesty, I'm a student at Birmingham University." Whereupon the Queen said to him, "Oh, I'm coming to your university in 3 weeks' time to join in celebrating your 150th anniversary." And my son said, "Your Majesty, we're all greatly looking forward to your visit." This was on a Monday. 2 days later, on Wednesday, the Vice-Chancellor's office at Birmingham University received a telephone call from Buckingham Palace saying that Her Majesty would like young Anyoko to be at the lunch that the university was hosting for her. This was an unbelievable human touch. And this is just one example. There are other examples I can give you. She was a very human person.
Francis Emmanuel Macron led a tribute remembering a kind-hearted queen who was a friend of France.
Her wisdom and empathy have helped us all to steer a path through the historic ups and downs of the last 7 decades. With her passing, we all feel an emptiness. We are grateful for her deep affection for France. Elizabeth II mastered our language, loved our culture, and touched our hearts. From her coronation on, she knew and spoke with all of our presidents. No other country had the privilege of welcoming her as many times as we did. In her, I have known a great head of state, a unique example of her devotion to her people, and a very close ally.
And former U.S. President Barack Obama said the Queen had captivated the world with a reign defined by grace, elegance, and tireless work ethic.
The United States and the United Kingdom have shared a special relationship. We've stood tall and strong, and together we faced some of the greatest challenges this world has known. And while many presidents and prime ministers have come and gone, Your Majesty's reign has endured. As I said last year at Buckingham Palace, that makes Your Majesty both a living witness to the power of our alliance and a chief source of its resilience. As a steadfast ally, loyal friend, and tireless leader, Your Majesty has set an example of resolve that will be long celebrated. And as we work together to build a better future for the next generation, it is gratifying to know that the bonds between our nations remain indispensable to our two countries and to the world.
The incumbent U.S. President Joe Biden described the Queen as more than a monarch, saying she defined an era.
I had the opportunity to meet her before she passed, and she was an incredibly gracious and decent woman. And the thoughts and prayers of the American people are with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth in their grief.
I am proud to have lived in the second Elizabethan age. Her legacy will be profound. History will remember few like Queen Elizabeth II. We mourn her passing. We are grateful that we have witnessed and benefited from her remarkable life. May she rest in peace.
With the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, her heir and successor, King Charles III, now reigns as Britain's sovereign.
Hip! Hooray! Hip, hip! Hooray!
He was formally proclaimed as king at the Ascension ceremony at St. James's Palace, performing the ceremonial yet constitutional rites.
By whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We therefore, the Lord Spiritual and Temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London, and others, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us.
Clerk of the Privy Council, Richard Tilbrook, proclaimed him King of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, before declaring, God save the King.
God save the King.
God save the King.
After the proclamation, King Charles III described Queen Elizabeth II's reign as unequaled in its duration, its dedication, and its devotion.
My mother's reign was unequaled in its duration, its dedication, and its devotion. Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and to seek the peace, harmony, and prosperity of the peoples of these islands. And in carrying out the heavy task that has been laid upon me, and to which I now dedicate what remains to me of my life, I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
4 days after her death, Queen Elizabeth II's coffin has left Balmoral Castle, where she passed as Britain's longest-serving monarch. She begins her final journey. The funeral cottage is making a 6-hour journey from Balmoral to Edinburgh, passing through Aberdeen and Dundee. To get a glimpse, thousands of people are lining the route as the late monarch is driven to the palace. The coffin will arrive in London on Tuesday, and the Queen will lie in state at Westminster Hall from Wednesday, ahead of her funeral in London's Westminster Abbey on Monday, September the 19th. Meanwhile, the Queen's funeral will be held in Westminster Abbey. And that's it on this episode of the program. Thanks for your time and, of course, your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Uzongo.